The scream wasn't coming from a woman. It was the sound of 1,200 pounds of pure, untamed fury slamming against reinforced steel. The rhythm was so violent it rattled the bones of everyone within 50 feet, a war drum that announced one simple truth: some things refuse to be broken. Madison Cole stood in the shadows of that Italian compound, dust still clinging to her worn leather boots, her honey blonde braid catching the harsh LED lights. She was 28 years old, 5'6" of Texas sunburn and stubborn pride, and she was staring at a problem that had defeated every man who'd tried to solve it. The black Andalusian stallion, Aries, they called him, was supposed to be a symbol of power for Tomaso Marchesi, the most feared man in New York's underworld. Instead, the horse had become his most public failure. 5 professional trainers had quit. 2 had been hospitalized. The last one, a decorated champion from Austria, had left in tears, whispering something about the devil himself. But Madison didn't see a devil. She saw something else entirely. She saw herself. Because 3 years ago, she'd been just as wild, just as broken, just as determined that no one would ever control her again. But what happened next? That's the story that changed everything. 3 years earlier, the voicemail from her mother arrived at 6:47 a.m. on graduation day. Madison was already awake, standing in front of her dorm room mirror in the cap and gown she'd worked 3 jobs to afford. She'd pressed it carefully the night before, treating the cheap polyester like it was silk because it mattered. Because today was supposed to matter. "Madison, it's your mother." The voice was cool, detached, the same tone she'd used to cancel a dentist appointment. "Your father and I won't be making it to College Station today. He has a surgery scheduled, and I have a deposition. I'm sure you understand. These things are more important than, well, congratulations on your degree, I suppose. Try to do something useful with it." The message ended with a click that felt like a door slamming. Madison stared at her reflection. 25 years old, summa cum laude in veterinary medicine, specializing in large animal trauma, a field most people considered too difficult, too dangerous, too masculine for someone like her. Her phone buzzed again. A text in the family group chat. "Sister Emma, Dad just bought me the cutest Mercedes for making partner. So grateful for supportive parents. 2 hearts mother, so proud of you, sweetheart. You've earned it. Father, that's my girl. Success recognizes success." Madison's thumb hovered over the screen. She could respond. Could point out that she was graduating today. Could remind them that she existed. Instead, she turned off her phone, walked to the ceremony alone, and sat in the back row while families around her took photos and celebrated and proved that love was something you gave to daughters who became lawyers and doctors, not the ones who chose horses over prestige. That night, drunk on cheap tequila in her best friend Riley's apartment, Madison made a decision. "I'm done," she said, her Texas drawl thick with emotion and alcohol. "Done trying to be what they want. Done apologizing for who I am. Done waiting for them to see me." Riley, bless her heart, just handed her another shot. "So what are you gonna do, Mads?" Madison wiped her eyes, smearing mascara across her cheeks. "I'm gonna be so damn good at what I do that they'll have to see me. I'm gonna become the best. The absolute best. And when they finally pay attention?" She raised her glass. "I'll be too busy to care. But becoming the best? That required surviving first." The wilderness years. The term large animal trauma specialist sounds impressive until you're standing in a frozen field at 3 a.m., arm deep in a horse's wound, your hands numb and your bank account emptier than your parents' pride in you. Madison spent 2 years working ranches across Texas, Oklahoma, and Montana. She took the calls no one else wanted, the middle-of-the-night emergencies, the probably gonna die anyway cases, the horses too mean or too broken for anyone to bother with. She slept in her truck more often than not. Ate gas station food. Wore the same 3 pairs of jeans until they were more patch than denim. Her student loan payments haunted her like ghosts, and some months she had to choose between groceries and insurance. But she learned. She learned that trauma isn't random, it follows patterns. That animals remember pain in their bodies even when their minds try to forget. That trust isn't given, it's earned through consistency, through showing up, through being the one steady thing in a chaotic world. She learned that strength isn't about dominance. It's about presence. And slowly, quietly, her reputation grew. The ranchers started calling her the horse whisperer, though she hated that term. There was no magic, no mysticism. Just patience. Just observation. Just a woman who understood what it felt like to be misunderstood, to be written off, to be told you were too much trouble to bother with. By year 3, she'd saved 42 horses that other vets had recommended for euthanasia. She'd pioneered a technique combining traditional horsemanship with modern trauma therapy. She'd published papers that prestigious journals initially rejected because her methodology was too unconventional, then quietly accepted when her success rates proved undeniable. She was making a name for herself. Small, but growing. Her family never asked about it. Then came the call that changed everything. The Italian job. The man on the phone had an accent like expensive wine. "Miss Cole? My name is Marco Rossini. I work for someone who has a situation. A horse that multiple professionals have failed to help. We've heard about your work. We're prepared to pay whatever you ask." Madison was in a Montana barn, stitching up a mare who'd tangled with barbed wire. What kind of horse? An Andalusian stallion. Aggressive, violent. He's hurt 3 people. The owner has invested significant resources, but nothing has worked. Red flags everywhere. Why me? A pause. Because everyone else has given up. And we don't accept failure. Something in his tone made her uneasy. This wasn't a normal ranch call. Who's the owner? Someone who values discretion, Miss Cole. If you're interested, a plane ticket to New York will be arranged. You'll be compensated for your time regardless of outcome. $20,000 for a consultation. More if you succeed. $20,000. That was 6 months of student loan payments. That was stability. That was finally getting ahead instead of just surviving. I'll need to see the horse first. No commitments until I assess the situation. Of course. The plane leaves tomorrow at 6 a.m. from Billings. Madison hung up and looked at Riley, who'd been listening on speaker. That sounded sketchy as hell, Mads. Yep. You're gonna do it anyway, aren't you? Madison thought about her bank account. About her parents' silence. About the way she'd felt sitting alone at her graduation. Yep. Riley sighed. At least text me every day so I know you're not dead. First impressions. The compound was nothing like Madison expected. She'd imagined rustic stables, maybe a nice ranch. What she got was a fortress disguised as luxury, iron gates, security cameras, armed guards in expensive suits, and a main house that looked like it belonged in a Mafia movie. Because, as she'd learn within the first hour, it basically did. Tomaso Marchesi was 33, devastatingly handsome in that dangerous Mediterranean way, and carried himself like someone who'd never heard the word no without following it up with violence. But Madison didn't care about any of that. Her attention was fixed on the horse. Aries was magnificent. Pure black, muscles rippling under skin pulled taut with fury. His eyes were wild, white-rimmed with panic disguised as aggression. He screamed and crashed against his enclosure with enough force to dent the reinforced steel. The sound rattled through her chest, familiar and heartbreaking. She'd seen this before. Not in horses. In herself. Miss Cole. Tomaso's voice was silk and steel. You're the specialist? Madison turned, taking in his tailored suit, his cold eyes, his absolute authority radiating like heat. Most women would have been intimidated. She wasn't most women. And you're the owner who thinks you can buy solutions to problems you created. Her Texas drawl was calm, almost lazy. That horse isn't aggressive. He's terrified. But you already know that, don't you? Something flickered in Tomaso's eyes. Surprise, maybe. Explain. She walked toward the enclosure, ignoring the bodyguards who tensed at her approach. You've been trying to dominate him. Force him. Break him into submission. It's not working because that's not how trust works. 5 professionals have tried, 5 professionals tried to make him obey. Madison stopped at the gate, her voice dropping. I'm not gonna make him do anything. I'm gonna ask him to trust me. Big difference. Before anyone could stop her, she closed her eyes and began to hum. It wasn't a song, exactly. It was something older, something her grandmother had taught her before she died, the only family member who'd ever really understood her. A low, rhythmic melody that seemed to vibrate through the air itself. Aries froze mid-charge. His ears, pinned flat with rage, slowly swiveled forward. His breathing, harsh and rapid, began to slow. Confusion replaced fury in those intelligent eyes. Madison opened her eyes and extended one hand, palm up. Not demanding. Just offering. The stallion took one step forward. Then another. His massive head lowered, inch by careful inch, until his warm breath ghosted across her palm. The silence in the compound was absolute. Behind her, she heard Tomaso's sharp inhale. Heard Marco's muttered prayer in Italian. Heard the world shift because a woman had done in 30 seconds what 5 men couldn't do in 3 months. Aries pressed his forehead against the gate where her hand rested. A sound rumbled from deep in his chest, not aggression. Submission. Trust. Madison finally turned to face Tomaso. His expression was stunned, almost vulnerable in his shock. You've got a problem, Mr. Marchesi, she said quietly. But it's not the one you think. Explain. His voice was rougher now, unsteady. She stepped back from the gate, and Aries whickered softly, a sound of protest, of loss. This isn't an aggressive animal. This is a terrified one. She met his eyes squarely. Someone broke him. Deliberately. Methodically. And whoever did it knew exactly what they were doing. The temperature in the compound dropped 10 degrees. You're telling me, Tomaso said, his voice dangerously quiet, someone sabotaged my horse? I'm telling you someone sabotaged you. Madison crossed her arms. The horse is just the weapon. And the person who wielded it? They're still here. What came next? Madison moved into the stable quarters that night. Not the luxurious guest wing Tomaso offered, but the converted space adjacent to Aries' stall. She needed to be close, needed him to see her, hear her, know she wasn't abandoning him. The first 3 days were brutal. Every time she thought she'd made progress, something would trigger Aries' trauma and he'd spiral back into panic. She barely slept, ate standing up, wore the same clothes until they were stiff with sweat and dust. But slowly, incrementally, trust built. By day 4, she could enter his stall without him panicking. By day 7, she could examine the faint scars on his flanks, evidence of repeated electrical stimulus, carefully applied to create conditioned fear responses. Someone had tortured this horse to make Tomaso look weak. To undermine his authority publicly. Finding out who became her obsession. She started noticing patterns. Every time Silvio Rossini, Marco's brother and Tomaso's head of acquisitions, walked past the stables, Aries would explode into terror. Not with the other guards. Not with Marco. Just Silvio. Animals don't lie. They can't. Madison documented everything. The reactions, the timing, the specific triggers. She examined Silvio's equipment, his clothing, his habits. And finally, she found it, the custom leather belt he always wore, with tooling marks that matched the scarring on Aries's flanks exactly. The night she told Tomaso, she thought he might kill someone. His rage was ice-cold and absolute, the kind that didn't need volume to be terrifying. Are you certain? His hands were steady, but his eyes promised violence. Animals don't lie, Madison repeated. Aries knows who hurt him. Your belt matches the scarring pattern. And I'd bet money that if you search his quarters, you'll find the modified cattle prod he used. They found it. Along with detailed notes about trauma conditioning, about breaking Tomaso's public image, about destabilizing his authority from within. Silvio had been planning a coup. And he'd started with a horse. But what happened next? That's when Madison realized she wasn't just there to save an animal. She was there to save herself. The breaking point, the confrontation, happened at dawn. Tomaso had Silvio brought to the arena, surrounded by guards, all pretense of loyalty stripped away. Madison watched from Aries's stall, her hands gentle on the stallion's neck. He was calm now, sensing that the threat was being handled. You tortured an innocent animal, Tomaso's voice echoed through the space, to hurt me. Silvio's smile was cold. Power respects only power. Loyalty is a myth for the weak. You've gone soft, boss. Everyone sees it. And now everyone will see this. Tomaso could have killed him. Should have, by underworld standards. That's what Madison expected, violence, blood, the cycle continuing. Instead, he did something that shocked everyone. You're finished here. Not dead, that would be mercy. You'll live knowing that you failed. That a woman you dismissed solved in days what you spent months orchestrating. That your entire plan fell apart because you underestimated someone you shouldn't have. He turned to Madison, his eyes holding hers across the arena. That's the real lesson. Power isn't about who you can hurt. It's about who chooses to stand with you. Silvio was escorted away. Disgraced, not destroyed. A harder punishment, in some ways. Later, alone in the stables, Tomaso found Madison grooming Aries with methodical precision. You changed everything, he said quietly. I just did my job. No. He moved closer. You showed me that the things I thought made me strong, the fear, the control, the dominance, they were actually making me weak. Because the moment someone exploited that system, I had no defense. Madison set down her brush and turned to face him. For the first time since arriving, she let him see her fully, not the professional, not the specialist, but the woman underneath. You want to know the real secret, Mr. Marchesi? Tell me. Strength isn't about never showing vulnerability. It's about choosing when to be soft and when to be steel. She paused. That horse didn't trust me because I was strong. He trusted me because I let him see I was scared too. That I'd been broken too. That I understood. Tomaso stared at her like she'd just spoken a language he'd been trying to learn his whole life. Stay, he said. Not just for Aries. Stay and help me build something different. Building something different. 6 months later, the Marchesi Animal Sanctuary opened on 300 acres of New York countryside. Madison oversaw every detail, the trauma-informed stable design, the rehabilitation protocols, the carefully screened staff who understood that healing required patience, not dominance. Aries was the first resident. Within a year, 47 more animals joined him, horses, dogs, even a wolf pack. Every one of them damaged, discarded, written off as too difficult. Just like Madison had been. The media loved the story, dangerous Italian businessman redeemed by Texas Cowgirl. They ate up the romance angle, the transformation narrative, the fairy tale. But the truth was more complex. Madison didn't save Tomaso. She didn't fix him or change him or make him better through the power of love. What she did was show him that another way existed. That power could be used to build instead of destroy. That loyalty freely chosen was stronger than loyalty enforced through fear. The rest? He did himself. And she did the same thing for herself. The reckoning. The invitation arrived 2 years into the sanctuary's operation. Madison was in the paddock with Aries when she checked her phone. Texas A&M University requests the honor of your presence at the dedication of the Madison Cole Center for Veterinary Trauma Research. Her hands started shaking. They were naming a building after her. The university she'd graduated from alone, with no family in the audience, was now honoring her groundbreaking research into animal trauma recovery. The ceremony was in 3 weeks. She should have been thrilled. Should have felt vindicated. Instead, she felt hollow. Because the people whose approval had mattered so much all those years ago? They still hadn't reached out. Not once. Tomaso found her sitting in Aries' stall, the invitation crumpled in her fist. What's wrong? He sat beside her without asking, their shoulders touching. They're naming a building after me. That's incredible. Why do you look like someone died? Madison laughed, but it came out broken. Because my parents still don't care. They'll probably see it in the news and think, oh, how nice, and then go back to bragging about Emma's latest case. And I hate that it still hurts. I hate that I still want them to see me. Tomaso took her hand. Then show them. What? Go to that ceremony. Stand up there and accept that honor. And if they show up, great. If they don't? He squeezed her fingers. You'll have an entire auditorium full of people who do see you. Who know exactly what you're worth. 3 weeks later, Madison stood on a stage in front of 600 people. The building behind her was beautiful, modern design, state-of-the-art facilities, her name carved in stone above the entrance. Her parents weren't there. But Riley was. And Marco. And Carmela, the housekeeper who'd become like a grandmother to her. And Tomaso, sitting in the front row with an expression of such fierce pride it made her throat tight. And in the third row, visible through the auditorium windows, a live video feed showed Aries grazing peacefully in his paddock, a living testament to what she'd accomplished. Madison approached the microphone. Her prepared speech dissolved. 3 years ago, she said, her Texas drawl carrying through the space, I sat alone at my graduation. My family didn't come because they didn't think my degree mattered. They didn't think I mattered. A ripple of surprise through the audience. I spent years trying to prove them wrong. Trying to force them to see me. And I did incredible work, not because I loved it, but because I needed validation. She paused, looking at the building behind her. But somewhere along the way, something changed. I stopped working for their approval and started working because I loved it. Because the horses needed me. Because I finally understood that the only person's validation I needed was my own. Her eyes found Tomaso. Someone once told me that strength isn't about dominance. It's about presence. It's about showing up consistently, honestly, vulnerably. And that's what I've tried to do, show up for the creatures no one else wanted. The ones deemed too broken, too difficult, too much trouble. She smiled, and it was genuine, radiant. This building represents 15 years of research into trauma recovery. But it also represents something else, the power of refusing to accept other people's limitations. Of believing you're worth something even when your own family doesn't. She looked directly at the camera broadcasting the ceremony. Looked at the lens knowing somewhere, maybe, her parents might be watching. To every woman who's been told she's not good enough, who's been dismissed and overlooked and made to feel invisible, you don't need their permission to be extraordinary. You don't need their approval to change the world. You just need to believe in yourself as fiercely as you wish they believed in you. The applause was deafening. After the ceremony, as people congratulated her and took photos, Madison's phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Madison, this is your mother. We saw the ceremony online. We had no idea you'd accomplished so much. We'd like to talk, if you're willing. Madison stared at the message. A year ago, she would have cried. Would have immediately responded, desperate for their acknowledgement. Now? Now she felt nothing. Just a distant sadness for the relationship that could have been but never was. She slipped the phone back in her pocket without responding and turned to where Tomaso was waiting. They reached out, she said. Are you going to respond? Madison thought about it. Maybe. Eventually. But right now? She laced her fingers through his. Right now, I've got a sanctuary to run and 47 animals who actually need me. They can wait. Tomaso smiled, that rare, genuine expression he only showed her. That's my girl. No, Madison corrected gently. That's my choice. Big difference. Epilogue, the real ending. 5 years after that ceremony, Madison sat in her office at the sanctuary, reviewing applications for their expansion program. They'd just been approved for another 100 acres. The waiting list for animal rehabilitation had grown to 300. Her phone rang. Her sister's number. She almost didn't answer. But curiosity won. Madison? It's Emma. A pause. I saw your interview in National Geographic. The one about your trauma recovery protocols. Okay. You're incredible. What you've built, what you've accomplished. I had no idea. Madison leaned back in her chair, looking out the window at Aries grazing in the afternoon sun. That's because you never asked. Silence. Then, quietly, you're right. We didn't. Mom and Dad, me, we were so caught up in our own definitions of success that we couldn't see yours. Is there a point to this call, Emma? I wanted to say I'm sorry. Really sorry. And I wanted to ask if maybe we could start over. If I could get to know my sister. Madison felt something loosen in her chest. Not forgiveness, not yet. But maybe the possibility of it. I'll think about it, she said finally. But Emma? If you're serious, you need to understand something. I don't need your approval anymore. I don't need Mom and Dad's pride. I'm not that girl sitting alone at graduation waiting for her family to show up. I built a family that chose me, that sees me exactly as I am. I understand. Good. Then call me next month. We'll see. She hung up and found Tomaso standing in the doorway, 2 cups of coffee in his hands. That sounded important, he said, handing her one. Maybe. Maybe not. She sipped the coffee, perfect as always. You know what I realized? What? I used to think the story of my life was about proving them wrong. About showing my family I was worth something. She smiled. But that was never the real story. What's the real story? That a girl who felt broken and invisible learned she was actually perfectly whole. That she took her pain and turned it into purpose. That she built an empire of healing instead of an empire of hurt. Madison stood and moved into his arms. That's the story worth telling. Tomaso kissed her forehead. I'd read that book. Good. Because I'm writing it. And she did. 3 years later, Untamable, a memoir of healing and horses, became a New York Times bestseller. Madison went on tour, speaking to packed auditoriums of women who saw themselves in her story. Her parents bought a copy. Read it. Sent her a letter saying they were proud. She wrote back, "Thank you. But I don't need you to be proud anymore. I'm proud of myself. That's enough." Because that was the real ending. Not forgiveness or reconciliation or family healing. Just a woman understanding that the only approval she ever needed was her own. And that? That was the most powerful thing of all.